My guest today is Chief John Perez. John recently retired as the Chief of Police for the Pasadena California Police Department. In his nearly 37 years of service, John has literally served at all ranks in the department. During his career, John worked patrol, narcotics, counterterrorism, and as a SWAT sergeant, lieutenant, and commander. John helped to form the first generation of Pasadena's tactical team, which had the challenge of deploying as a full-time gang enforcement team and a SWAT team for many years. John was twice awarded the Chief's Medal of Excellence and received several commendations over his years. This is a great conversation where we focus on resilience and the need to stress inoculate and build grit in those you lead. My name is John Becker, host of the Debrief podcast and the founder of Aardvark Tactical. This is a new short-form podcast series from the Debrief. In each episode, we will discuss a single aspect of leadership in depth with subject matter experts who operate in high-stress environments inside and outside of the tactical community. The goal of this series is to give you direct access to the men and women whose leadership skills have been tested in the world's most dangerous situations and to provide you with specific, actionable information that you can use to hone your leadership skills. This is Battle-Proven Leadership. John, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to have you here, man.
Thank you, man. Good to be here. Always a pleasure.
So the topic for today's episode is building resilience in employees. And, you know, I know over the course of your career, as the course of mine, you've seen resilience change. You know, we've kind of reached a time socioeconomically where people are becoming less resilient. They're quitting their jobs. They're quiet quitting their jobs, which is the new term of rage, which I guess means just do a really crappy job and wait till they fire you. But, you know, it seems like we're at this kind of strange time socioeconomically that is driving a lack of resilience. I'm curious first what your thoughts are on what the cause of that is.
So absolutely agree with you. I saw it during the pandemic and the tragedy of what happened with the George Floyd incident with our own workforce in Pasadena. There was a lot of negativity. There was a lot of pressure. A lot of things were occurring that you saw people just want to quit. It's human nature when things seem so impossible to achieve. Why will you continue to do it? And I think this led into many of our professions, obviously policing at the lead of that throughout the nations. I run around and provide training through FBI LEADA and do some of the assessments in organizations. You sense the leftover, the collateral damage from the pandemic and that social justice movement that's still ongoing, both of those. But that initial hit to us hit the private sector. I think it hit a lot of politicians. We were suddenly either having to lead at the moment or you just wanted to tap out, give up, go home and wake up and it's all over. And I think you're absolutely right. This has impacted us in almost every part of society, even to the way politicians make laws. We see this happening.
Do you think that, just kind of theoretically, do you think the root of this is, and I've heard a bunch of theories. People think it's because it's the way we're raising our kids, right? Everybody's super special. Everybody gets a 7th place trophy. I think there's an argument that we're no longer teaching resilience because we're not making things hard anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
That's part of it. There's no one thing that causes everything to happen. From the economy to anything else, there's a series of events that cause things to begin to fail or succeed. Now, obviously, percentage-wise, each one of those has a different number assigned to it. But I do believe that this has been a period of time. If you listen to experts from the 1970s, Dr. Frankel and others who spoke, that noticed this in the 70s, that we were losing some of our resilience and that we were being raised. And really, it was a better living that we were having. Things weren't so hard. We weren't going out to the backyard and having to, find our food or use the restroom 100 yards away or plant our food and wait for it and hope there's rain this year. All those things went away, man. Everything got simple for us. Now we have to find new challenges and new ways to get at it. But I think that is really the essence. That's been a period of time to what we've gotten. Now you need something to be a linchpin, the tipping point, and we had that. I do believe that the pandemic and the social justice movement We just placed our foot on the accelerator, and we are just going 100 miles an hour nonstop. And what would have taken us another 10, 15 years to reach, we're here now.
It's interesting because you basically, to some degree, it's an evolutionary biology argument, right? Like you think about it, like, man 500 years ago, man a million years ago, man 10,000 years ago, whatever, had to hunt their own food and deal with cold and deal with hot and deal with outside threats. And if you go into parts of the world where people are still doing that, they don't have the medical problems, they don't have the depression, they don't have the emotional problems that you see in a civilized, quote unquote, civilized society. It does seem that, evolution works in, it doesn't always make things better.
Well, and look where we're at. Look at the result of all these things. The workplace violence we're dealing with, the political nature, whether it's at work or just personally, you're looking at these things and what's happening in different places. There are so many other impacts of how the world is traveling right now. We're frustrated. We're talking about the recession coming, if it's not here already. You're talking about not having enough people in the workplace. Amazon can't deliver. The gas went up. Inflation hit. All these things have just accelerated, and they're all here now. You have two options, right? In my life and like yours, either we pick up and go and push forward, or we tap out and go do something else. Which one's easier?
Yeah. And I think that there is a certain amount of that is kind of just wiring. Like, I think you think about like the SEALs buds, but buds is not a training program. It's a screening process, and it's screening for how gritty you are, right? It's screening for, if you look at like Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, it's screening for what happens to you when things get really bad. And how bad do you want it? And how tired do you have to be before you quit? And there are people that just don't, that thank God that, there are guys that make it through buds and go and are SEALs and Delta and Rangers and people that can do that. But it seems to be an increasingly smaller percentage of our population.
Well, I think it's a nature of risk management versus crisis management, right? That's, to me, risk management. You're preparing for something down the road that may happen. We did this in Pasadena, where we started doing immersive training on many areas of use of force and how we trained at the range. We saw our use of force drop by over 50%. We dropped the same amount with our kicks and punches, what we call strikes. We saw police reports getting better, and it was really, really good. But this was because the risk management portion, the immersive training, the stressful periods to see how you're going to react, were improving. We shouldn't have to wait for a crisis management. Imagine this. Your kid's in college and they come to you and they said, hey, you know what, Pops? I want to be TikTok famous. So I dropped out of college, right? You're now in crisis mode. You wish you had the risk management time back where you could talk about the stressful part of, wait a second, you're going to be unemployed and no money, man. Hold on a second. But now we're in a moment of crisis management where all hell's breaking loose at 10 p.m. in the living room of the house, right? So this becomes a problem for us. So I think we're in that world of trying to figure out, how do we get more risk management to be more resilient before we're in a crisis management stage when you hope you have it based on the, what the battlefield you just landed in, whether it be in the private sector, in the military, in public safety or in government, family life, wherever it's going to be. Do you have that resilience, and how much of it have you prepared prior to that point? You can't just say you have it. You got to develop it.
So that's an interesting point. We've seen over the years a decline or a reduction in the stress nature of police academies, right? I can remember early in my career, you were fighting in the academy, you were getting punched in the academy. They were trying to run you. I mean, when you went through the academy, they probably tried to kill you repeatedly. And we've kind of reduced that because it does down select demographically in a way that we are deeming not what we want. But I wonder if in the process of eliminating that stress, we are eliminating the inoculation to the stress. I recently interviewed Earl Plumley, who's a Medal of Honor winner, Army Medal of Honor winner. And he talked a lot about stress inoculation and how in the process of being selected down into being a Green Beret, he had been picked on, yelled at, screamed at, harassed, cold, hot, uncomfortable, scared so many times that when the event that won him the Medal of Honor kicked off, he didn't even think about it. He wasn't scared. He was just in a fight. And it strikes me that if we're not stressing ourselves as kids, if we're not stressing ourselves in high school and college, then we get to the workplace and it's stressful and we don't know what to do. We panic. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that you see a lot of that. You go to elementary schools and you start to sense some of these issues kids will have later on in their life. You could sense it when my kids were going to school and watching some of the kids around them and listening to some of the issues around the elementary school. You could almost put names to these people in the workplace now and say, oh, that's little Johnny. Oh, that's Frank at work now. And I think that is true. And I believe that we have gotten to a point that we can't force people to play every sport in the world. We can't force your life to be so difficult you don't have these things. So there's got to be a process, whether it be in school or there be a type of college curriculum that teaches us how to be more resilient. Harvard right now, their most popular class is to be more resilient. It's an actual class where is filled every semester. Not only is that class always filled, they have placed it on the internet, online. You could do this class for free to try to be happier as part of it, but actually trying to figure out what will build this resilience in you and talk about what could lead you down this path to be tougher and better at what you're doing. So I believe it does need to be part of not just the educational part, but real life. There's got to be a part of this thing that we are understanding how we could react to stress. So when stress comes, we have proper reactions to it. And there's so many things we could do beforehand as adults right now. If we're going to teach it to our kids and people around us or apply it ourselves, what are we doing right now as society? Great books are out there for us to learn from, but are we doing it? Are we really pushing ourselves forward to say, I am going to be better and I am going to be truly resilient because I understand what that means?
Yeah. And I mean, so obviously you've spent your entire career in a profession where stress resilience is really important, right? Every police officer is going to experience stress and fear and see things that they don't want to see and trauma. And I mean, a lot of their job is being surrounded by people who are in trauma. As a chief, what were you doing to try and improve the resilience of your employees?
So one of the important things as a chief is the experience I had before that. I recall back when DNC was happening around the turn of the century, and we were preparing our people for large protests and things were happening. There was a chance for us to have to deploy chemical agents and all these things with protests and demonstrations. We started to teach our people how to put on gas masks and go through a tunnel with these. And I literally saw people just give up, pull their masks off during the course of training. Not only that, they would pull the mask off the people next to them, the other police officers, as we were actually trying to produce this training so they were ready for the field. And it made us think, man, we need to educate people what they're getting into. I saw people during my SWAT days that you would put a scenario and make it purposely the door wouldn't open or that barrier's in the way. And once in a while, you see an officer just stop and say, I can't get through it. But wait, stop for a second. This could be real life. So I've taken that experience over the years as I promoted, and I've reminded myself for all of us, there's an educational part, and that is to give them the truth of what's happening and what potentially we could come across and make sure that our training is matching up with that. So if we are talking about, I'll give you a great example, we're talking about demonstrations and protests. No problem at all lining up and seeing if we have to be out there to try to stop a demonstration or protest. Well, most of the time you don't. You let them do their thing that they need to do, and most of the time they're going to leave peacefully. Not always. Then you have a point of occupation where suddenly you have to take action and people are going to fight against you and throw things at you. How ready is the workforce for that? So as I walked into the police chief's job, I really thought it was important to educate our people to the environment. So every week I would put out an email, I would issue it out that talked about our challenges in the environment, from the laws that were coming, the changes we were making, and the things we had to do, and how training was going to match up with that. Well, lo and behold, you go down a couple of years and get what we have. George Floyd incident happens. We have the social justice movement. Pandemic comes up. My workforce, I'm very proud of them because many times I was fatigued of having 20-hour work days, if not the entire night, and heading down to see how the troops were doing. And I would find out most of the time they were energizing me. So something was happening with our people that I felt from a resilience standpoint. They understood it. Their mindset was positive. Their habits were really good. And they really were leaders wherever they were at. They didn't need to be the formal leader. They were just a leader in the organization. And that motivated me. So if they were motivating me, I thought they must be motivating people around them as well. So we just wanted to make sure that the education and the training and the real life scenarios were all meeting up with each other. And there's a process for that. There's a process for all of us to be ready for that type of engagement, you know?
Well, and I think it's interesting because the term stress inoculation carries with it a couple of implications. One being that, you know, it's like a vaccine. It's going to prevent it from happening. But the other thing is it carries with it the implication that it's going to give you small exposure that will then prevent you against large exposure. and one of the things that I think that law enforcement has historically done well is to gradually increase, you know, crawl, walk, run, gradually increase the amount of responsibility, gradually increase the amount of pressure to enable you to adapt to that. Is that kind of what your view of it is?
Absolutely. There's an important part of resilience that all these steps I talked about before of having the mindset, building your habits, really looking at your behavior and getting to a point that you're ready for a challenge to come up, a failure point you're going to pivot off of. And that pivot point is your resilience, that fortitude, that grit needed at that point to figure out this ain't going well. I need to do something. Do I have it in me? Now, some people have, you know, incidents in their life where they did something heroic and something that they saved another life or their own life, or they acted and they didn't know that it was inside of them. It was there. But most of the time, that's not the thing. We have to react to all the pressures we have every single day. So when we pivot, the pivot might be at work, in our personal lives, other things that are happening. The science is saying you could get ready for that. You don't have to go out there and be involved in the fight every night in Fight Club to have resilience. They talk about, you know, the last 10, 15 seconds of your shower to make it very cold. They talk about fasting, you know, for take it slow, but up to 24 hours to give your body that feeling of what it's like to be under that stress. Workouts, exercising, not just going through the motions, but parts of that workout that are difficult where you're actually pulling the weight up or you're pushing or you're hitting a bag, that kind of exertion, those kind of points, it's building resilience in you. So in life, I think we've gotten to a point where we have to examine how we've been living. It's not about the 3 meals a day in the fancy restaurants and how much money you can make. What are you doing on top of that? So I do agree with that.
Well, and you know, it's again back to evolutionary biology, right? Like we become soft as a species. We've become soft, and we're getting softer. And you know,
not for bad reasons.
No, I mean, yeah, it's first world problems.
Yeah, you know,
right? Yeah, it's like, hey, man, you got plenty of food, and you've got time to get fat and lazy and lay on the couch.
Absolutely.
The consequence to that, though, is, and I mean, I see this in my personal life. When I am very fit, so when I'm prepping for an Ironman, I cannot be stressed. It is almost impossible to make me feel stressed because, you know, my resting heart rate's in the 40s and I'm constantly beating the crap out of my body, and my body's just like, yeah, whatever. It's just a workout. When I'm not, I feel stress. It affects my sleep, right? Like it is a physiological thing. And I think the resilience is physiological. It's not just psychological. I think there is a psychological component, but the resistance to, you know, resilience comes from both a physiological and psychological component.
Absolutely. I think you're right on that point. I just finished doing a 4-day fast a few weeks ago, and, you know, going through that process, the first, you know, 24 hours, you wanted to eat your family, right?
Yeah.
But then come the 3rd and 4th day,
you don't care anymore.
Yeah, you know what? You could go another day. I didn't, luckily, but you could go another day. You find yourself in a place, your body is reacting to the stress. It's reacting to not having food, and suddenly you're keeping yourself busy. You're more focused. I found myself
Oh yeah.
doing more things, and sleeping was really good. And like 6 hours, I was popping up. It was really good.
Yeah.
There's a good trade-off here.
Yeah. Sense of smell becomes really
Yeah,
good. Your vision becomes really good. Yeah.
It was something.
That's fascinating.
But how do you bring this to the workforce? Running around the country and looking at this stuff at the private sector, everything going on. How does an organization create that resilience you talked about? I do believe part of it has to be education. You have to let people in the organization know what you're facing. In the years back, in the early days, you didn't hear about all the problems. Like the bosses kept it to themselves. They were always perfect, right? Now we're talking about the true self, the authentic self, the real leader, the true north leader that we want. They're sharing many more things today than ever to let you know, like, hey, I need your help. I need you to be a little bit tougher than you have been, and this is why. So I do believe the workplace, even the home life, we have to have that better communication to say what the challenges are, and that starts the path to resilience, I think. And for us at the police department, I really want to look back when I was there as the chief, is that we did that. We educated the workforce. You had the information you had. You know what your role and your responsibilities was going to be. Now we have to make sure the training is matching up. We're giving you the training. Are we doing brief backs? Are we going out there making sure we have all the equipment? Are we giving you scenario-based training so you understand what, and I'll give you a great example. We were talking about, we went to a jiu-jitsu style of use of force training, not to teach all the traditional jiu-jitsu type of movements, but to combine policing with that and find which ones were the best ones for our profession. Because what we noticed, if you try to use the regular traditional moves, the outer vest would kind of spike up into your chin and push your neck up as you're trying to apply a hold, and all of a sudden you cannot see what you're doing anymore. You lose some of the control. So we had to adjust and combine policing training with jiu-jitsu traditional training and figure out a studio how we were going to get this done. And our training grew. More people were interested in coming. It helped really to improve communication, how we were handling incidents out in the field, and it helped to reduce some of the use of force incidents we were having. So it does make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of, like, a key component to building resilience is doing hard stuff. It's doing hard stuff. It's training hard. It's, whether it's jujitsu or running or lifting weights or, it is intentionally seeking stress, physical and emotional.
And I would agree with that. And when you get to that point, the question for you is, what have you done before that? What have you done in your life to create purpose? Do you know what it takes to create purpose? Everything you do should have a purpose behind it. In policing, we know what it is. In policing, we've lost a lot of that purpose. The hardest part about police work is this. No matter what anybody else tells you, this is the hardest part about police work. Always has been, always will be. Chasing the bad guy with the money bag, with the jail outfit on, easy, right? Easy to do. When you're driving down the street and you think, the word is think, a crime has occurred or is about to occur, you have to decide in your mind, do you do something about that or not? Do you have enough to act on it? And if you don't, you keep driving. Now you add in the pandemic. You add in the social justice movement. Are suddenly officers losing some of that resilience to say, I'm going to have to get out of this car and stop you? I don't really have a reason. My instincts are telling me the way you looked at me, the way you tossed something in the bushes behind you, something's going on. Am I going to get, and we talked about this a little bit and I'll get back into it, but am I going to have the backing and the support to have stopped you? So all of a sudden, officers and deputies across this great country of ours lost some of their resilience, their confidence to get out of the car and say, I think you might have a gun. Now, I do realize in Pasadena, we did a really good job of being proactive and making sure crime didn't rise, but there was a problem as well. How much of policing can a community handle to try to stop crime? You're going to have, I think we were pulling down 200-300 guns in a couple of neighborhoods a year that people were carrying, and it led to a couple of shootings that were heavily criticized. So where's the odds? Where's the line of trying to protect the community and doing these things? Nationally, I think a lot of our police officers and probably people in the business sector were like, well, wait a second. Back to the original point. The gap between frontline and executives, regardless of the profession, do they feel they got support from the leaders up above? Is resilience part of our tribal language that we're talking about to make sure that if I take a chance, my head's not being chopped off. And without that resilience from a command staff or executive or CEOs, and you push that down to the front line taking chances, people are going to take less chances. Where's the productivity? Right?
Yeah, you raised an interesting point, because resilience is an individual trait, right? People are resilient to things. It's also an institutional trait. And I think there is a difference between the resilience of an institution and the resilience of an individual. So when somebody quits at Pasadena PD because they're frustrated because they don't like their job or because it's too hard, that may be an institutional, it may be an individual issue. That may be like this person just can't do hard stuff and it gets scary and they quit.
Absolutely. That happens once in a long while, but yes.
But it can also be an institutional trait, that there is something in the culture of the institution that makes it harder to be there than somewhere else.
Well, now you're getting into a core point of leadership here on authentic self, on what we talked about a little bit ago, true north. Who you are as a leader of an organization, formally or informally, really has a lot to do about the institutional resilience, right? Trust and cooperation have become very large parts of our organization that weren't part of it 20, 30 years ago. That wasn't even the narrative. Come to work, do your job, do what you're supposed to do, and make sure you're doing it right. And now we're adding that plus the fact to say, look, the front line wants to trust the executive staff, but what's going on to make sure we have that trust and that we're getting that cooperation going on both ways? Because if we don't have that trust and cooperation, we're dealing with, dictatorships and telling you what to do, and compliance. And with compliance comes a lot of mistakes as opposed to cooperation. Every day we'd rather have cooperation than compliance, mutual cooperation, right? And so I do believe that the resilience has a lot to do with the leaders today understanding trust and cooperation. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking for the inside scoop from the front line. How do you become a contrarian? There's a process for contrarian. There's a way you could state your issue, your problem with the decision being made, and still have that resilience, still have the trust, still have the cooperation. So we're in a place today where leadership has become more essential than I think any other period of time in the last 40 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's interesting because what you're talking about is a collaborative environment, right? And in a collaborative environment, everybody feels valued. In a collaborative environment, and when I teach culture-centric leadership, we talk about this. We talk about building a collaborative environment so that everybody feels valued, so that everybody feels supported. And when you're talking about resilience, especially institutional resilience, if you don't feel supported and you feel alone, then every day requires a much higher level of resilience.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like if you hate your job, you got to be really motivated to go there and work.
What about liking your job, but you don't feel you have the support or the things that you need? There were times, I recall with Aardvark, with you guys, we had the DNC again back in 2000 when we knew we didn't have the equipment.
Yeah.
We did not have the equipment that my people in the unit, the men and women, said, hey, look, it's fine, we're doing all this, but we don't have what it takes. So we went over to your office and, hey, we need these things. You said, go ahead and take them, but anything you use, pay for it, but take everything that you need. And that gave everybody that level of trust, and we found the cooperation because of that. But at the same time, I believe mentally the resilience grew. Like we could do this. We could get out there. We could be prepared for what might go wrong. We got what we need.
Yeah, having the tools that you need, and I think as a leader, like when going back to institutional resilience, as a leader, you not only have to give. I think when you give your people the tools that they need, you're telling them that you care about them.
Right.
Right. When you don't give them the tools they need, you're telling them the exact opposite. Right. If I say, hey, John, go jump out of that airplane, but we didn't buy really good parachutes, like so it may or may not work. Then you're like, wait a minute. Like, obviously you don't care about me. And so then it becomes harder for the people to care about the institution, right? If I know the institution doesn't care about me, then why do I care about it?
Absolutely.
And I think that, the other thing that you brought up is predictability, right? Like I think we want in our leaders predictability. I want to know what you are going to do. I don't have to know exactly what you're going to do, but I want to know what you're going to do before you do it. And if you surprise me, I get knocked down that Maslow triangle, right? Like I get pushed back into feeling fears of safety because I don't really know what you're going to do. And so I'm never really safe.
A big part of leadership today, and I learned this, as a young commander and going into the chiefhood, was that people want to feel safe in the workplace. It's not just about the community at policing. Our people in the workplace want to feel safe, and that safety comes from having proper communication, proper level of trust, gaining cooperation, having the equipment you need, given space for people to be creative with things. These are difficult places to get to, but that's another new element in today's world here in the 21st century that we're dealing with. That's another space that leaders have to really focus in on and say, am I doing that? What can I do to make sure you feel safe? When I began to tell the community as a police chief that it was important the police department feel safe before the community, some heads exploded and they didn't get it. I explained it and they got through after a while, but the reason that was important is that they're going to leave the station house, our department, the employees are going to go out into the field and they felt safe. How much better was that traffic stop?
Yeah.
How much better was the interaction? Now add to this, how much better is your resilience knowing that we provided the equipment, the training, the conversation, the information you needed on top of that? So now your mindset's where it needs to be. You're feeling safe, but you're ready to respond if necessary. The Theodore Roosevelt, the famous quote about speak softly but carry a big stick, right? You got to be able to make sure that you make people feel safe as well, but you're ready to go if you need to. And that would help us really start to decrease the amount of these critical incidents that go wrong at a traffic stop. Those are horrendous across the country. Those are moments of failure, of lack of resilience on two sides, right? The police officer just responding to a driver that's not cooperating. But at what point could that been turned the other way for each one of them on cooperation, right? Because you have a driver, you don't know what the heck's going on. You pulled them over for a minor traffic violation, and suddenly they're not giving you anything or doing anything, and they start to act a little bit erratic, and you're now responding, how do I get through this? Do I continue to hold you down? Do I keep to react? Or do I say, hey, stop, I'm leaving, another day, another time? That very seldom happens, by the way.
Not really an option.
Yeah, not really an option at that, but you don't know there's a dead body in the trunk.
Yeah.
Back to my original point. Hardest part about police work, right? Hardest part about police work to keep it safe. These are very difficult places for us that we're getting into.
Well, it's interesting because, I remember back to psychology early on in college, and I think it was Skinner, where they talked about predictability, right? Like if you, I think it might have been monkeys. If I feed you,
Yes.
if I feed you every day, I ring a bell, I feed you, you're a happy monkey. If I shock you every time I feed you, you get hit with an electrical shock.
Right.
You're still a happy monkey.
Right.
You're mad you got shocked, but you're still a happy monkey. If I randomly shock you every once in a while, they stop eating and they die.
Horrible.
We need predictability. And when you stop and think about police work being a perfect example of that is not a predictable job. You arrive every day. You have no idea what your calls are going to be. And even when you get to a call, it's often not what you think it is. And it can evolve in a very negative way.
Right.
So that part of your world is unpredictable.
And what's unpredictable is the workforce, because you have men and women from all kinds of backgrounds.
Yep.
Coming from everywhere, different places, from poverty to sometimes wealthy families that become police officers. And you might not know your own grit. You went through an academy and some of that was tested, but now you're out in the field and it happens in real life. It really starts to test you a little bit. The men and women that have to deal with this every single day. And at the end of it, you worry about the criticism being in the paper. And as you go across the country and we teach this, it's like today, any police department across the country could see CNN on their doorsteps after an incident, just like that. Just in a moment's notice, you're suddenly the attention of the country, and trying to prove the facts or the reactions of the officer were built on decisions that were both legal and proper and were in the furtherment of a safer community. Not so simple. is it? No gun, maybe weapon, maybe not, better communication. It's become a difficult place. So officers now, on top of everything else, we see this firsthand across the country. Whether you go to Police One or you go to the websites or the news, we are seeing this video content instantly. We didn't have that 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. Now it's there for us. That is causing another level of stress for police officers when it comes to resilience. They're like, man, this is impossible for me to do this. And when you start to have that conversation psychologically in your mind that you can't do it, that's the point where you start losing resilience. That's why these other things about having purpose, creating that passion, having good behavior, having positive habits, all will help you through that pivoting point. But if you don't, you're just stuck with, I can't do this no more. And I've talked to police officers in other departments and my own that decided just this was enough. I'm leaving. And I'm leaving now because I can't do this no more.
So to wrap this up, as a leader, you've got, a couple of minutes with a young leader to help him to understand or help her to understand how to build resilience in their people. What do you tell them?
I tell them that, number one, remind them of the purpose of our profession. You have to have the passion. They have to get it. They have to understand that our mission and value statements do mean something in our organizations, that we do have to go with that and make sure people believe in it as we do. From that point, there is actual training that's got to meet up with what we're saying to build resilience, that things are not going to go your way. There are times you will fail. Do they have the confidence of the leadership to make sure they're with them during those incidents, during that travel? Is the organization prepared to educate them regularly on what's happening in the environment, on the news, to explain things to them? Are we doing public education? That's one thing a chief needs to do, is go out there and really talk to the community, council members, city managers. I love my relationship with the city manager, always briefing him as much as it could. And that helped create confidence, and the officers would sense that. So a chief really has to make this a priority these days more than ever before. Resilience comes with good habits, good understanding how to have a positive mindset and all that we do. We know it's going to be negative. It's not all, this running through, a field of roses. It's not that simple. But we do know that a good chief understanding this and doing their homework to provide a level of education in the organization on resilience, on making sure they have the training and the equipment, they have to keep pushing for that. Don't let it go. So many opportunities I see today for chiefs to step up and say, hey, look, we own that one. And for them to engage their organizations more often, what we would call all hands meetings. Those are important events for departments to have those. If a police chief hasn't done one every 6 months or so, they're losing an opportunity to make sure their organization's coming together. So those are things for any leader in an organization that they need to keep in mind, is keep being a student of the profession, keep learning how to build resilience, be that teacher for your organization because you have the experience that you've proven and the skills needed, because that's why you were chosen as a chief. But what comes for that person is understanding you have to further it with actual skill sets and having that conversation that things will get bad for us. They will be critical events. We will have to pivot from this thing. And are we ready for it? Right? Are we ready for it?
Well, and more importantly, when things do go bad, the organization cares about you and we're here for you.
And you know what? We could end that point, because for me, during a very, very crucial moments during the social movement, I had many, many, many officers that would come up and check on me and see how I was doing and pray for me in groups. And I want to think that for all the work we had been doing before this period of time, that we created that resilience in all of us, that we're going to get through this together. So when the moment came, it makes me think for a moment that paid off for all of us, that we did come together to get through it. And that was hugely important for us.
Absolutely. Hey, brother, thank you so much for being here. It's great chat as
Always an honor,
always.
man. Always an honor. Thank you, brother.
Thanks.